The Earth is on the verge of destruction, and our boy here is the strongest Giga Chad that has ever existed. So in order to save Earth, he slept. You see, on this Earth, pollution has gotten so bad that mutated monsters began to appear. And in just a short span of time, every human on Earth faced an existential crisis after being almost completely wiped out. So our Giga Chad here is placed on a sleeping chamber in order to save the Earth and wipe out these monsters once the Earth have been healed. While our boy slept peacefully in stasis, the monsters continued to ravage the planet. Yet as decades turned into centuries, and centuries blurred into millennia, the shift in the global environment finally began to compound exponentially. Those extraordinarily mutated creatures gradually began to deteriorate, making way for new species to thrive. This cycle of evolution continued for a mind-blowing 100 million years, eventually bringing us to a scene where a trio of newly evolved humanoid beings was desperately trying to outpace a terrifying monster. The frantic survivors stumbled across an ancient ruin and quickly ducked inside to take cover, hoping for a miracle. The relentless demonic beast barged right into the facility after them, closing in fast. Backed into a corner with nowhere left to run, the trio was essentially ready to become a satiating dinner for the creature. In a final desperate plea, the girl in the group cried out for help, praying for the village's guardian god to rescue them. Miraculously, her words were heard, triggering the awakening of our boy, who had been sleeping in the capsule right behind them for 100 million years. The ancient human unleashed an energy beam, bullseyeing the monster on the spot without even sweating. The confused trio had no clue what the hell just happened, and the situation only got more messed up when a butt-naked man popped out of nowhere. The very first thing this naked Giga Chad did was look for his clothes, which were neatly preserved in an indestructible lockbox his friend Kagura had developed back in the day. After booting up the lab's ancient systems, he discovered he had basically speedrun 100 million years into the future. Although the passing of eons had corrupted most of the data, it was an absolute miracle the machines were functional at all. It appeared the nanomachine virus Kagura created did exactly what it was supposed to, annihilating the corruptors, which helped preserve the facility against all odds. He also found a communication cube left behind by his old friend, though its contents remained a mystery for now. He then turned toward the humanoid locals, completely forgetting his manhood was just dangling in the breeze. Realizing there were literal kids staring at him in the buff, he quickly got dressed, restoring the same fresh look he rocked millions of years ago. A short while later he exited the facility with the trio, only to be instantly blinded by the intense sun shining above the horizon. Truthfully, he wasn't expecting such a vibrant sight after all this time. The view before him was nothing short of magnificent, a stark contrast to the apocalyptic wasteland he once knew. The kids immediately started heading back toward their settlement, insisting that their guardian god follow them. Our boy, on the other hand, was far too preoccupied trying to figure out exactly what kind of species he was dealing with. After all, humanity should technically be fossil fuel by now, which made this whole thing super weird. These humanoids with distinct animal traits had to be the result of millions of years of evolution mixed with the continuous interference of nanomachines. Not to mention, these guys were yapping in the exact same language used by humans eons ago, heavily implying they branched off from the exact same root. He introduced himself as Shindo Jin, requesting that they just use his first name. In return, the girl with goat ears introduced herself as Hakama Phil. The koala-looking dude was Dan Poo, and the femboy beside him was Shandy. Hakama decided to save the rest of the pleasantries for later and began dragging Shindo along, yapping that her village was just around the corner. She was incredibly desperate to bring their newfound guardian god home so he could fend off the current invaders. Tragically, by the time they arrived, the village had already been raided and devastated, with multiple settlements completely engulfed in flames. Shandy absolutely lost it at the catastrophic sight and rushed ahead in sheer panic to find her mother. As they surveyed the damage, Shindo took a moment to contemplate their dire situation. He immediately noticed how flimsy the town's fortifications were. Both the boundary walls and the houses were constructed from simple wood, showing a total lack of defense. This detail alone made it glaringly obvious that this new civilization was technologically way behind the human era he remembered so vividly. Pushing deeper into the village, Shindo spotted a woman actively fighting off a bizarre monster. From just a single glance, it was obvious she was barely holding her own. It didn't take long for him to realize that the creature she was facing looked identical to the corruptors from millions of years ago. Furthermore, the surviving corruptors weren't the only unusual thing here. Little Hakama apparently knew some kind of magic technique that made her physically glow, which was pretty wild. Ultimately, her intervention proved unnecessary. Shindo dashed forward and effortlessly knocked the living daylights out of the monster with a single devastating kick. Moving swiftly, he scooped up the injured older woman in his arms and dashed out of the danger zone, leaving little Hakama a clear opening to deliver the finishing blow. Channeling her magic, she unleashed a tiny fireball that packed a massive punch, officially putting the monster down for the count. Observing the dead creature, Shindo confirmed his theory. The atmospheric nanomachines had indeed stripped these monsters of their legendary healing abilities. What he didn't understand, however, was how a local girl was able to wield those same nanomachines. His educated guess was that these folks drew nanomachine particles directly from the atmosphere and channeled them into offensive spells, much like he did back in his era. The glaring catch was that historically, only pure humans were capable of manipulating that technology. He directly expressed his curiosity to the woman he just saved, asking if everyone in this era possessed such magic. She wasn't entirely sure what he was getting at, but she clarified that only a select handful of people could actually wield this ability. In their culture, it was believed that individuals blessed with divine powers were the only ones privileged enough to use this magic. In their specific village, there were no more than 4 people who held this distinction. Shindo didn't have to think too hard to piece it together, realizing the truth instantly. Divine powers was just their primitive fancy way of explaining nanomachine manipulation. Hakama rushed over to the older woman, who turned out to be her grandmother, frantically yapping about the rest of the villagers, only to learn they had already evacuated. This statement washed a wave of relief over the trio. Though the grandmother was deeply worried about why the kids returned to the dangerous village instead of evacuating with everyone else, scolding them slightly. After all, the beast they just fought was merely a larva compared to the massive adult monster currently terrorizing the area. Suddenly a voice of reason penetrated through the tension, assuring the old lady that there was absolutely nothing to fret about at all. That giant invader she mentioned? This newcomer confidently claimed he could slaughter it single-handedly, bragging super hard. The grandmother was shocked to see these familiar faces back in the war zone and immediately questioned the man about the other villagers. The blue-haired warrior confirmed that the rest of the civilians had safely reached the shelter. As it turned out, the older man accompanying this blue-haired guy was actually Hakama's father. The two shared an emotional reunion on the spot. Naturally, he demanded to know where she ran off to. The girl honestly admitted she went straight to the sealed door, much to the grandmother's absolute shock. The older woman was furious that Hakama wandered into that god-forsaken territory. According to local legend, the domain beyond that door belonged strictly to the guardian god of the village. Because little Hakama felt utterly threatened by the monster invasion, she explained she simply went to seek the deity's help. And as she proudly pointed out, the literal god from their legends was standing right beside her. Understandably, the grandmother was highly skeptical, flat out refusing to acknowledge this random young lad as their divine protector. Even worse, based on his appearance, they assumed our boy belonged to an inferior species, making the idea of granting him such a sacred title downright ridiculous to them. Stepping in, little Shandy tried to convince her blue-haired brother that Shindo was the real deal. In response, her highly prejudiced brother was quick to dismiss her claims, pointing specifically to Shindo's ordinary human ears. In their society, anyone who didn't inherit distinct animal traits was classified as a lesser being. As far as this guy could tell, his little sister was just operating under a massive naive misunderstanding. Still, the little girl stood her ground, proudly yapping that this man easily defeated the invader chasing them. Unimpressed, her brother brushed the feet off, arrogantly claiming he could take down an invader just as easily. Turning his attention to our boy, who already looked utterly exhausted by all this unwarranted crap, the blue-haired warrior threatened the intruder, telling him to leave the village immediately because they had no room to accommodate a being of inferior blood. The fool just walked right past Shindo, still running his mouth. He was so painfully full of himself that he voluntarily took on the suicidal job of killing the giant invader all by himself. By the way, this arrogant bluehead went by the name Sarlis. The grandmother became visibly distressed by the reckless, spur-of-the-moment decision Sarlis just made. She then turned her attention back to our boy, hoping for some reason. Even though she still couldn't care less about who he actually was, she admitted it would be incredibly rude not to express her genuine gratitude for him saving her life. Following her thanks, she asked for one final favor, requesting him to help escort the kids back to the safety of the shelter, while she went to ensure Sarlis didn't throw his life away due to sheer arrogance. Unsurprisingly, our boy flat-out refused to comply. They directly questioned his pride, and he certainly wasn't going to just stand there and let them trample all over it. He decided he was going to make damn sure they realized he wasn't some useless bystander, and he was definitely not an inferior species. The scene rightfully transitioned to the nearby lake, which was currently harboring the grotesque massive monster. Sarlis had finally arrived on the scene, and the dude didn't so much as flinch before dropping into a combat stance. With his spear and body charged with crackling thunder, he executed a lightning-fast sprint toward the beast. In an effort to counterattack, the vile creature quite literally used its own offspring as projectile weapons. Luckily, these unnurtured slimy larvae were easy targets for Sarlis's electrified spear. With the path cleared, Sarlis capitalized on the opening, leaping high off the ground to deliver a devastating slash directly across the bastard's face. The monster screeched out loud in sheer agony. Of course, we all know it couldn't possibly be that easy, and we'd be right. To Sarlis's utter dismay, the monster's deep gaping wound immediately began to regenerate. The sudden shock paralyzed the blue-haired warrior, leaving him wide open for a lethal counterattack. He had no time to dodge. But exactly as expected, Shindo intervened at the last second, effortlessly blocking the massive strike like it was no big deal. Sarlis, the once unshakably arrogant fool, was suddenly hit with a massive reality check, and the show was just getting started. The monster leaped back to launch another strike, with double the previous force. Our boy, however, didn't even grant the creature the opportunity to swing. With just a casual snap of his fingers, Shindo blasted a clean hole right through the monster's flesh. The cocky runt could only watch the spectacular display in stunned silence. Soon after, the rest of the group came rushing toward the water's edge. They hadn't even finished catching their breath from the crazy sprint before their jaws hit the floor all over again, watching our boy block the colossal monster with a single hand. As the monster continued trying to apply immense force, Shindo genuinely started getting bored of the exchange, sighing internally. Deciding to wrap things up ASAP, he grabbed Sarlis by the waist and leaped out of the way. By the time the camera panned out, we witnessed the massive monster completely pierced through and through by Shindo's energy. Sarlis frantically argued that big flashy attacks were useless if the monster could just infinitely regenerate. Thankfully, Shindo had already taken that exact variable into consideration. This was precisely where the nanomachines came in handy, actively neutralizing the monster's cellular regeneration. The damage Sarlis inflicted earlier was actually quite considerable, but the cut was far too shallow to overload the creature's healing factor. By now, Sarlis was practically having a mental breakdown and shitting his pants just processing the sheer possibility that this inferior guy might actually be their guardian god. Humorously, Shindo quickly denied having any divine roots that would qualify him for such a grandiose title. What he did know for a fact was that the entire reason for his continued existence was to safeguard the people of the future and slaughter the very monster standing in front of him. Enraged, the beast snarled and wildly swung its massive tail, desperately trying to squash the agile hero who kept slipping through its defenses like water. Having quickly formulated a winning strategy, Shindo proceeded to completely immobilize the creature by trapping it in dense yellow ice crystals. As he charged up a critical hit guaranteed to obliterate the beast into smithereens, he finally gave a proper introduction. He declared himself a monster born directly from humanity's own tragic foolishness. He was a relic who had survived through 100 million years of sleep, the designated weapon supposed to cleanse the earth of this horrific menace. Sarlis wasn't exactly in a position to comprehend what the hell this guy was yapping about, but the only thing he cared about right then was whether Shindo could actually live up to his massive claims. Well, of course Shindo could. After all, he was the literal culmination of countless brutal tragic experiments, a weapon prepared beyond imagination, born from humanity's blood-stained history. He was the first, last, and only true human remaining in this world. With his introduction thoroughly complete, Shindo unleashed an energy attack so blindingly intense that it instantly incinerated the monster. The beam was so unfathomably powerful that it shot straight through the Earth's atmosphere and pierced the vacuum of space, guaranteeing zero chance for the bastard to ever regrow, which was totally epic. With the monster definitively dead and dusted, Sarlis completely lost the will to speak, having just had his inflated arrogance thoroughly shoved right back in his ass. Meanwhile, unseen by the group, there seemed to be someone keeping a very close eye on our boy from the bushes. This mysterious baddie was originally sent merely to surveil the new type of invader reported at the lake. She certainly didn't realize she'd be lucky enough to witness an entirely different kind of monster in action. As far as she was concerned, even the elite top brass back in the royal capital wouldn't dare go solo against such a colossal threat. Yet this unknown young Chad just made it look like an absolute piece of cake. Later that day, Shindo finally listened to the million-year-old holographic message his friend Kagura left behind for him. His digital buddy kicked things off by acknowledging that millions of years must have passed by the time Shindo actually saw this. Because of this massive time jump, Kagura desperately wondered what the future of Earth looked like and whether the planet's environment had actually healed. Right off the bat, he delivered the bad news. The evil corruptors would never truly go extinct, even if the world itself drastically recovered, which sucked big time. And honestly, that fact was already pretty evident, since Shindo literally just finished fighting one. Kagura revealed that while Shindo was in deep hibernation, he periodically entered cold sleep himself, just to observe the gradual changes happening across the globe. Thanks to the environmental restoration, the overall number of corruptors was steadily decreasing. Unfortunately, as the ecosystem shifted, the corruptors began to evolve right alongside it. This adaptation was a glaring sign that the world would never be able to completely rid itself of this menace. To counter this, Kagura explained that he intentionally genetically edited the newly emerging life forms, giving them the potential to resist the corruptors rather than just falling prey to them. On top of that, Kagura revealed he left behind a massive power-up specifically for our boy. Yep, that ominous syringe full of glowing green liquid was exactly what Shindo needed to inject directly into his veins. Upon doing so, Shindo's body immediately began to crackle and radiate with arcane energy. The serum he just took granted him 100% compatibility with the nanomachines. Once the integration was fully complete, Shindo gained the insane ability to generate physical objects through nanomachine shape transformation. The best part, this upgrade was just the tip of the iceberg. His old friend revealed that he had hidden similar power-ups scattered all across the world. He purposely didn't store them all in one place, just in case the corruptors managed to destroy a facility and wipe everything out at once. Plus, this scavenger hunt ensured Shindo would have to travel across the globe and witness the magnificence of the new world firsthand. Kagura admitted he had no idea what kind of threat the corruptors would pose in this distant era, but he was absolutely certain that the future was far brighter than the bleak apocalyptic reality they left behind eons ago. As the message progressed, the holographic projection showed just how much the poor scientist aged over time. It was a bittersweet moment as Kagura expressed profound sadness, knowing he would never be able to see this beautiful restored world for himself. After officially passing the torch and handing over the responsibilities of the future to Shindo, the message finally concluded. Right on cue, Hakama and the rest of the gang arrived, actively searching for their so-called guardian god. She and the koala guy Danpo had come to drag him back to the village because the entire settlement was eagerly waiting for him. As they headed back, Shindo's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a familiar research facility, access key dangling around Hakama's neck. Curious, he inquired about the pendant, wondering exactly how she got her hands on it. Hakama yapped that long ago, an incredible individual told her ancestors to pass it down through the generations as a protective charm. Legend had it that if imminent danger ever threatened the village, this very key would summon the guardian god to protect them. Hearing this, Shindo was deeply moved. He was thrilled that his friend went to such incredible lengths to set everything up for him, leaving him feeling profoundly indebted to Kagura. Back in the center of the village, a full-blown party was already underway. While everyone was busy stuffing their faces and drinking, the kids finally paraded their guardian back into the spotlight. However, the mood shifted slightly, as the adult villagers immediately started gossiping upon seeing an inferior species creature. To their narrow minds, it simply didn't make sense for a biologically ordinary being to hold the legendary title of guardian god. Just as they were loudly doubting our boy's potential, Sarlis suddenly stood up and completely went off on the group for daring to point fingers at their savior. He even went so far as to dish out some well-deserved punches. After all, these hypocrites were the very same cowards who hightailed it out of there the second danger reared its ugly head. Watching this wild back and forth, Hakama and Danpo could practically smell the sheer hypocrisy radiating from Sarlis. After all, he was literally the first person to scoff at and vehemently doubt Shindo's strength just a few hours prior. The village grandmother stepped forward to address Shindo personally. Feeling overwhelmingly indebted, she attempted to express her utmost gratitude on behalf of the entire settlement. The reality was, if it weren't for his timely intervention, none of them would be standing there right now. The village would have been reduced to ash. True to form, our boy nonchalantly brushed off the flattery, stating that it was just part of his job. Still, he knew these folks wouldn't let him off the hook without giving him something in return as a gesture of goodwill. Rather than asking for material wealth, he requested something far more valuable, which was information. Our boy stated that he wants a detailed yapping session on the current state of the world, finally ready to learn the truth. She even reckons Shindo will be perfectly fine since he's obviously not your average Joe. She even tasks Hakama with being his official guide, suggesting Shindo take her along since she was already planning to head to the royal capital anyway. Because Hakama is one of the rare few who can wield divine powers, she wants to enroll in the prestigious academy dedicated to training magic users. Shindo is genuinely surprised to learn that formal educational institutions still exist in this era. Suddenly it becomes super clear that our boy has earned himself a very loud, very loyal admirer. Sarlis enthusiastically volunteers to act as the guardian god's personal bodyguard on the journey. The old woman quickly shoots him down, reminding Sarlis that he literally has zero reason to visit the capital. However, Sarlis loudly boasts about having a solid reason, saying he plans to join the esteemed Holy Knight Order. Grandma, however, knows this is purely wishful thinking. She ruthlessly points out that Sarlis couldn't even manage to get accepted into the basic academy, so joining the elite Knight Order is a massive long shot. This catches Shindo off guard. Considering Sarlis is a divine power wielder, our boy assumed the guy would breeze through the admission process effortlessly. Hakama enlightens our boy about the catch, saying there's a mandatory written exam designed specifically to filter out idiots, and Sarlis was tragically a victim of his own sheer dumbness. Banter aside, Shindo finds himself growing increasingly curious about this elite class known as the Holy Knights. Speaking of which, the scene transitions away from the village to a heavily armored knight. Our boy, the knight, is visibly stunned to learn that the giant invader terrorizing the Kodama village region has already been completely annihilated. The one delivering this massive bombshell is the exact same spy chick who was watching the entire lake battle from the bushes. The knight demands that she confirm the facts one more time, and the girl firmly corroborates her story without a single moment of hesitation. The Holy Knight is in absolute disbelief. Until today, he never could have imagined that anyone outside of their elite order possessed the raw capability to solo a monster of that caliber. Right in the middle of their debrief, a corruptor suddenly attempts to ambush the spy, leaping at her exposed back. The knight reacts with blinding speed, drawing his sword and slicing the monster cleanly in two. Instead of retreating to the safety of the kingdom, the knight makes a bold decision. He is officially way too intrigued, completely eager to personally track down and meet the mysterious man who effortlessly slaughtered such an enormous beast. Shindo wakes up to a gorgeous morning, enjoying the taste of the air, still finding it hard to believe that he could enjoy a scenery like this. Part of him regrets that his dear friend Kagura can't see it alongside him. One of the kids brings him his clothes, urging the guardian god to put them on. In the next scene, we have our boy out on the village side. Hakama's grandma is telling her to fulfill her duty properly as a guide, while Sarlis is acting all fed up that he couldn't be the one to lead our boy as a travel guide. Shindo takes special interest in the guy and even praises Sarlis's movement, assuring him that he'll be waiting for his arrival at the royal capital. This remark turns Sarlis's squealing into a total fangirl moment, wishing the guardian god the best and hoping that he takes care of Hakama. Hakama herself is told to be safe, and with that, the journey of the two begins with their departure. Hakama and the tall man walk together, crossing all kinds of gorgeous and scenic views. Hakama shows our boy around until they finally set up camp, where Shindo asks about how far the capital actually is. Apparently it's 4 more days of walking, so it's not as far as our boy expected. But Hakama is really curious about his side and why he's totally bent on exploring the world. Refusing to share, our boy tells her that it's a secret. Deep down, Gojo looking over here knows that the corruptors are still alive based on Kagura's loose description, and he even got to encounter a few in this area. Their normal rate of reproduction only occurs in destroyed and polluted environments, the exact opposite of this place, which means something or someone is causing a change behind the scenes that needs to be investigated. Hakama is scared to see him make a face so serious while lost in thought, so our boy apologizes to her for contemplating. Shindo understands one thing: this era isn't totally dominated by the corruptor creature. Signs of survival are clear and all around. His first main goal is to investigate the people of this era, then deal with the corruptors. Researching the monsters isn't so hard as he can personally do it at his leisure. Apart from that, Bro wants an immediate change, and requests Hakama to stop calling him a guardian god. She gives him too much respect even then, and our boy has to urge her to just call him Shindo. The sound of a horse galloping catches the attention of both. A holy knight has arrived alongside his team, urging to have a moment with our duo. This guy looks like your average Prince Charming, except our boy doesn't give a single fuck and asks about his identity anyway. Hailing from the Holy Knight Order, the captain of the 7th Division announces himself as Argus Walton. The concept of a Holy Knight is still new to our boy, who wonders if these are the interesting beings that the villagers mentioned. Among Argus's team, one bratty knight gets a full-on temper tantrum and roars at the commoner for showing complete ignorance to her leader by refusing to stand up. She even tells her captain that these two must be the main culprits, only for Argus to tell her to tone it down. Karina is yapping in the background while the Holy Knight addresses our boy with more respect this time. Our boy is simply curious about Karina's yapping earlier, but the Holy Knight brushes it off, acting like she was just being rude. Argus then changes topics and asks about the identity of our boy, where he came from, or where he's headed next. Hakama shares that they belong to Kodama village with a route set to the royal capital. Karina uses this as confirmation again, acting on her high horse as she accuses the two of being the inferior species. In fact, she goes on this whole pretentious expose, yapping like she's got 3000 IQ for revealing inferior beings from Kodama village. Jin is actually fascinated by the advancements of this world when he hears that there are birth records, but Argus butts in again and stops Karina from yapping out reckless assumptions. In fact, he can tell that the little girl Hakama is actually wearing special Kodama clothes, ones that are revered with high quality even at the capital. The children of the village don't wear such royal clothes, therefore confirming that they are indeed from the village, proving Karina's dumbass wrong again. Though he's certain of the girl, Argus unsheathes his blade and points it at our boy, declaring that he is different from the rest. First, the Holy Knight notes that he's never even seen our boy's clothes, asking where he belongs. The Holy Knight shares that many bandits have been plaguing the road between Kodama village and the capital. Argus claims it's possible that our boy is one of those bandits trying to traffic children, and that Hakama is also in on the act while acting harmless. The little girl tries to pitch in with a denial, but they refuse to believe a single word she is yapping about. Without thinking things through, Hakama charges up an attack only to get cornered with several magical swords pinning her from every direction. She earns the praise of the Holy Knight for having divine power, while our boy is pretty impressed by the power of a Holy Knight. Argus's capabilities are strong, and Shindo can see that right away. Now that he's in a position of true authority, the Holy Knight demands an explanation on where our boy came from. That information will be the deciding factor between letting our boy live or not. But just hearing that, Shindo glares at him with straight murder in his eyes. The tension is high, but eventually Bro decides not to pursue his feelings and simply gasps that he came from Kodama village. Karina jumps up to call him a cap artist to his face, but Argus genuinely accepts this explanation and puts down his weapon. This is a shocking turnaround, especially when the dude was moments away from dropping death threats. The Holy Knight can sense that he's not yapping a lie, while Hakama officially declares Shindo as the guardian god of the village. The concept of a guardian god fascinates the Holy Knight, but he doesn't take it seriously and turns around to leave. He goes back up on his horse, apologizing for his rudeness, since Argus was actually doing all of that as part of his job. The captain understands that they'll meet each other at the royal capital in the future, even offering them a chance to pull up if they run into some trouble. Saying so, he hastens to take his leave, totally embarrassing Karina, who wanted some serious drama to go down for some reason. Even Shindo is looking lost with this girl's psychotic need for chaos. In the next scene, we see the team en route to their next destination. Karina is forcing herself to stay mad for no reason, highlighting that Shindo is suspicious and that they shouldn't have let that inferior species get away. The words inferior species hang in his throat. Argus taunts the girl for not knowing which one of them is truly the inferior species, and confirming his thoughts, Rhea agrees too, much to Karina's shock. In fact, she emphasizes just how much of a godlike gap existed between them and the man they were facing. Argus actually attempted to make a move 3 times in one instance, but his resolve couldn't even allow him to commit. He could sense that Shindo, who had his hand in his pocket, was going to act immediately and counter him before the move was even made. Now I don't even know what the hell that means, but damn, good job our boy. By the way, Argus even tried to use divine power, but in the face of Shindo, the damn power didn't even activate, utterly frightening Karina. The same move that he pulled against Hakama to easily corner her couldn't even work on him. Rhea tried to do the same, only to fall short too, proving there's a whole different league of difference between their strength and a literal monster like Shindo. A feat like that, even in Argus's view, can only be pulled off by the Supreme Commander among the Night Order at best. Rhea and Karina scoff, but the Yapinator girl had zero idea just how outclassed they were at the time. Prince Charming emphasizes that they just met a straight-up monster, an anomaly different from the rest, and that it's fine if Karina made a mistake since she's new to their unit. As for the one who wiped the invader of the Kodama village, Argus suspects that it's the exact same guy. Karina thinks the situation is dangerous, but her captain is wise and knows it's risky to attack someone with zero intel. He also believes Shindo is pretty chill for being passive, and right now their main goal is to return to the royal capital, since their involvement is no longer necessary. The final thing they yap about is informing the guild regarding the bandit situation, though in Argus's thoughts he is left completely mind-blown by this guardian god character of Kodama village. If only that man could become their ally, it could solve a whole laundry list of issues their country suffers from. In the next scene, our boy is on the road again with Hakama, mentioning how they encountered someone interesting the other day. He wonders if all of the holy knights are just as cracked as the one they met, but Hakama clarifies that Argus was exceptional. Even among the Night Order, only the absolute best of the best are hailed as holy knights to become their leaders, placing Argus at the top of their league. She even gestures how insanely fast his spirit art activation was the other day, a term that our boy is totally unfamiliar with. Apparently in the current era, borrowing the powers of spirits is called divine power, and techniques used to cultivate such power are basically the spirit method or spirit arts. In other words, Kagura and Shindo's nanomachines are basically being treated like spirits beyond their comprehension. He knows that they must look like some really messed up fantasy trope for the current age, but he can't help but remember Karina's furious feelings regarding lesser beings. Shindo sparks his interest and learns that the current era holds several different races of people, including those resembling insects and fish. Based off her grandmother's words, a certain race could even live in water or specific regions alone, which changed with the passage of time as creatures evolved to adapt to the environment. This line is fascinating to Shindo, who immediately reflects that it means some survivors of humanity must have been the cause to kickstart an evolution cycle 100 million years later. He doesn't want to overthink this grand assumption though. Instead, Shindo figures that the people who didn't change and adapt basically became the livestock they call the inferior species. Since they can't adapt, they're seen as bottom feeders and weaklings, with society treating them like a bunch of nobodies and selling them off as slaves. The concept of slavery existing in this era severely bothers our boy, but Hakama stands super resolute in her own opinion. She brightly asserts that there's hardly any real difference between them and the inferior beings, yapping that she doesn't understand why people treat others with disregard just because someone is built different. Every person is weird in their own way, and hearing her yap like that, Shindo is low-key impressed with the little girl's character. While they're yapping, someone pops up in front of them, looking completely rugged and beaten down. This kid collapses on the road, begging for their help as Hakama rushes to his side. Shindo observes the kid closely, realizing that this one doesn't possess any animalistic features based off the ears, meaning it's some kind of human. However, the kid is covered from neck to toe with massive bruises, and these injuries aren't normal for a casual incident. Hakama tries her best to lift the girl up, while Shindo activates his powers to help heal the person. But instead of being grateful, the kid immediately drops the fake act. The kid pulls out a blade aimed right at Hakama's neck, threatening that she will kill her if he moves a single inch from where he stands. This situation turned out far different from what our boy imagined, and now he knows for certain that he's been set up from the jump. He scans his environment to check for anyone lurking nearby, and a man materializes into reality out of thin air, praising Poful for the good work by following his instructions. This ability is called stealth camouflage, functioning thanks to nanomachines absorbing the visuals of the surroundings to create an invisibility cloak. The only weakness is that the invisibility breaks upon movement, but these guys used it pretty well. The captain bullies Shindo, calling him an inferior species and picking on his neat clothes. He then demands to know where Shindo came from, but our boy is stone cold and on his mewing streak, so he doesn't utter a word. Hakama worriedly shouts for him, while the captain threatens to end the girl if he dares to move even a bit. Hakama acts on her own again by activating her ability, but our boy roars at her to stop at once, stating that she shouldn't use such power against people since it's dangerous. The little girl doesn't know what to do, while Captain Bandit over here is having the absolute time of his life realizing that the girl possesses divine power too. They ask Shindo if he can also wield such strength, but bro is in the mood to mess around, so he acts like a mystery waiting to be found out. Pissed off, the meathead kicks him down, reminding the inferior species to stay in his lane. The captain takes issue with his subordinate trying to damage their goods, though they don't have high hopes of selling them at a high price anyway. They don't even entertain the idea of Shindo possessing divine power, since he looks like an inferior being at best, while at the same time Hakama starts to realize that these are the exact bandits and slave traders Argus warned them about. The bandit leader activates a spell of his own to take care of the girl first, leaving Hakama fearing for her life that they'll be captured and sold as slaves at this rate. In the next scene, hilariously, Shindo wakes her up from her beauty sleep. Bro's got zero shirt on because these fools literally stole all his drip, only sparing his undies. Hakama seems to be alright, but she's genuinely curious where they even are. It looks like some kind of containment facility where the other slaves are kept, and Shindo explains that it's the hideout of the bandits, pointing to the ones who were captured before them. All of these guys look like they're in rough shape, with most being inferior species. It's a super grim scene, but hilariously, Hakama is way more curious why this dude's got his tits out in the open like that. Shindo explains that they took everything away from him for looking strange, but she's just amazed at how insanely confident this man is without his clothes. Apparently this look is what suits Shindo most in terms of comfort, but aside from that, she's mostly curious why he didn't just fight back then and there. With his godlike power, he could have wiped them in a single go. Before he can answer, Poful is sent inside the room for some breakfast delivery, and after finding them awake, she offers them a meal. Hakama is pissed off, but Poful doesn't really care whether they hate her or not, stating that she never had any expectations of being forgiven. The pure girl is annoyed, but our boy stuns the blue-haired girl by actually calling her kind. It comes as a total shock to the pretend victim, but in reality, our boy shares that bad people don't even care about whether someone hates them or if they deserve forgiveness. The fact that Poful thinks of these things is enough to conclude she's kind. Regardless, the underwear man over here is done playing yoga and gets down to real business. He grabs hold of the bars in a nonchalant fashion and literally bends them apart to carve himself a way out, leaving Poful utterly flabbergasted by what she just witnessed. In reality, Shindo has actually been waiting for her all this time for a private conversation. The blue-haired girl is confused as to why, but Shindo can already sense that she's being blackmailed into working because someone she cares about is imprisoned here somewhere. Poful is terrified at how this guy's guess is so damn spot on. He even goes on to heal her wounds, emphasizing that the only reason he was fooled is because he knew the girl's wounds were actually real. Criminals don't really go around roughening up their own allies to near-death condition, which is how he instantly knew Poful was being blackmailed and forced into dirty work. Benauled, Shindo's words cause her to experience massive guilt, ultimately giving her the chance to share that her little brother has been captured by these 6 scumbags. They constantly threaten that they'll sell the boy outside the country if she resists, ensuring she'll never see him again. Poful breaks down into tears, weeping that even her parents were slaughtered by these bastards, so her brother is all she has left. Just hearing her side of the story gets this man hyped up and ready to move, unlike anything else. Shindo is in a literal fit of rage, and Hakama finally understands why he let himself be captured like that. His goal has always been to save these people, but he also knows that villains are stubborn and annoying. Even letting a single one escape leads to disaster later because they can rebuild their power and create trouble again. Long story short, bro wants to squash these cockroaches together, and he starts off by kicking the crap out of this furry with a backshot. With the path now open, our boy intends to rip these lowlives to pieces. Shindo knows the psyche of villains more than anyone, and we get an understanding of this when we circle back to 100 million years into the past, when human civilization had reached its technological prime. The kid at the time was beaten down and had nothing. His first thoughts were to admire justice in the world, but that admiration came with a second, more haunting realization. Any world that needed justice was also filled with an overwhelming amount of bad people, people who wanted to hunt him down, for example. Living an ordinary life is something to be praised, but in the kind of environment he grew up in, the boy never experienced the peace he ever wanted. So when it came to the people who tried to mess with him, Shindo literally crushed them under the weight of his powers, breaking their bones and destroying them over the years. He took down bad people everywhere he went, continuously crushing the ones that disrupted the peace of the world, until one day, a man came to him suggesting that Shindo was born into the wrong world, and that leads us back to the present. Our boy is walking like an absolute unit to confront the losers in front of him, having already laid waste to piles of bodies. Bro just wants to increase his kill count, and refusing to answer any questions, he throws one of their own at the henchman in front. The moment one of them catches the guy, our boy swoops in with a lightning-fast kick and slaughters the other. His friend is left horrified because Shindo just sends this dude crashing into the wall with a giant crater, appearing no different than a goddamn monster who doesn't know how to stop. Terrified, the guy tries to run away, but it's pointless. Only his agonizing screams reach the lower-level captives. Pro can sense that this scream is coming from the others, and she's genuinely starting to wonder who the hell Shindo is. Hakama casually yaps that our boy is a walking god, and that they have nothing to worry about since he's going to take care of everything by himself. Right now, they need to follow his instructions to head outside, but it freaks Porus out that they're actually about to be saved. The leader of the bandits isn't exactly easy to beat, even though he possesses a talent for powerful divine magic. In a battle of brute strength, you can't even imagine anyone taking that guy down. But while Poir is yapping to herself with those useless thoughts, our boy already has the dude quivering on his knees. The boss begs our boy to stop, offering him fat stacks of cash and even adding slaves into the picture. By the way, Poful's brother is kept in this room. Our boy is disgusted by the mere suggestion of being offered slaves. He kills another guy in front of the boss, while the bandit leader freaks out over what the hell is going on, and already knows that he's cooked. Not even his spirit arts can seem to activate in the face of our boy's aura. But even more than that is the mystery of why Shindo gained all this power. Hilariously, our boy calls this clown a half-baked villain because the real ones at least have the spirit to run away when they know they're outclassed. But the bandit leader alongside his henchmen are all condescending clowns who look down on others, deluding themselves that maybe they could win. But the moment they fear a loss is in sight, they begin to plead. Honestly, watching this beatdown after all that yapping is so satisfying, and following our boy's advice, the bandit leader moves his feet to start running. He goes straight to the elevator to pull the lever, unleashing a secret weapon they've encaged as a monster. Shindo is shocked to find a corrupted under their control. It's a powerful beast acquired for a certain noble. What bothers me is how the hell-purple Arnold Schwarzenegger over here couldn't break out of his cage sooner. The bandit leader is more than happy to give Shindo a challenge, vowing that he's going to reduce everything to chaos as the creature roars its battle cry. The first attack is made by the corrupted monster, who swings to pummel down our boy on his feet. The attack is blocked, giving us a view of that massive guy getting shut down in the process. The bandit leader is left speechless by the power of Shindo's booty. The power of his muscles. Meanwhile, Shindo yaps about how he was literally born with a superhuman body possessing muscle fibers, several orders of magnitude higher than the average person. Now that it's his turn to strike, our boy kicks the creature back before vowing that he's going to unleash even more of his strength. Bro shoots a hollow purple except it's blue, one-shotting the monster to pieces in a single blast. All that yapping and the bandit leader is back to where he started, on his knees again. Shindo stares him down, wondering what this pathetic scumbag is gonna do next. Now that he's run out of options, Bro tries to weasel his way out, begging to be spared. But my glorious white-haired king responds with a hook to his face, completely shutting down any chance of mercy. With the matter settled, he takes back his aura-farming drip and apologizes to the kids in advance for making them wait. First, Bro wants to check the documents to gather direct evidence of their crimes. He opens a drawer and finds an interesting set of notes. Just one glance at them probably makes you think that this dude has hit the jackpot. But no, our boy has absolutely no idea what the hell he's reading right now. The language is unfamiliar to him, so he really needs Hakama's help on this Duolingo shit. Even then, Shindo just can't place a finger on why these bandits were using the corrupted. To confirm his suspicions, he inspects the torn remains of the monster he defeated. This way he can access the cameras of the surrounding nanomachines floating in the room. Shindo wants to check the records of last week at the least, and stumbles across some footage right to his liking. Apparently this one noble came to them with the monster, and refused to elaborate on his intentions with the creature. Instead, he left them a little nugget. This conniving villain hinted that the country was going to drop dead soon. Shindo takes note of this detail for later, while the scene cuts to the children that escaped the containment. Poful ends up reuniting with her little brother Nino. The two embrace each other in a long hug, feeling safe that neither of them got hurt badly. She turns and addresses Shindo as a god, thanking him for all his efforts, while Bro flat out refuses to accept the title. Aside from that, he's curious about the people in red uniforms currently seizing the bandits. Apparently they're supposed to be guild staff members. In fact, the person with the majestic hair and beard standing close to them is the guildmaster of their city. The same man is drawn to Shindo, and comes up to ask if he was the one behind the incident. Our boy confirms his contribution, demanding that Padrek introduce himself formally as the guildmaster, and thank him for his hard work. Padrek takes one look at the guy, stunned as to how someone could defeat such a large number of people without even taking a single hit. Despite our boy wielding the appearance of an inferior species, Padrek can tell this guy is no laughing matter. The guildmaster yaps about how the incident resulted in heaps of damage, and that bandit extermination requests are at an all-time high. This makes Shindo curious, because he thinks any lord would do his best to prioritize the capture of the bandits. The guildmaster laughs, arguing that not even the lord has that level of authority. Dealing with the crimes is considered the duty of the guild members, the ones who swear their loyalty to the king. Even if the lord, the ruler of the land, were to commit crimes, they'd have to report the situation to the king. Even if something like that sounds crazy unlikely, Padraig is confident in his assumption, while Shindo is comparing the situation from 100 million years back, realizing that a lord represents a mayor and the guild is acting like the police. Even then, the lord is not someone who can be trusted easily. Shindo decides to surrender all the documents that he recovered from the bandits, asking if they can actually be useful to the guild. The guild master reads one of them, only to realize that it's a proper list of the ones who traded with the bandits. Thanks to this list, they can easily arrest the whole group. Curious, Shindo asks if the city lord's name is also on the list, but impressively enough, the lord's name is nowhere to be found, making him a clever villain who hides his tracks. For now, Shindo can't do much about the situation. He's helped free the slaves, so he wants to know what will become of them now. The guildmaster assures them that the guild is going to take responsibility for returning them home safely if a missing report was filed. But for the ones who don't have such a thing, unfortunately, they don't have anywhere to go. The system is shitty because it refuses to account for cases like Poful and Nino who lost their parents. So Shindo asks for a shelter to keep them in. Shockingly, this era doesn't even have a shelter in town. Padraig can only find work for these kids. But because they're both classified as inferior, doing that will be difficult too. The kids are sulking while Shindo is disappointed that it's all the same in this world. He doesn't want to leave these kids alone, even if there's nowhere to work. Suddenly, an idea pops up in his head. So he asks them if those two would be down to work somewhere, if they got the chance. Poful agrees and wants to give it a shot, which reminds Shindo of the Golden Knight Argus, who once offered that he'd help them out if they ever needed it. In the next scene, we're at the royal capital Kermosi, inside Argus's huge flex of a mansion. The Holy Knight is on his way back when suddenly he feels a random drive-by chill out of nowhere. Arriving at his residence, he tells the team to go rest up for the day. Argus returns to his quarters. He's welcomed by an entourage of maids and butlers welcoming him with pride and glory. The first thing he does is ask for an update, and from the reactions of his servants, the Holy Knight can gather that something must have happened. The butler apologizes for bothering his master right after he got back. While this is going on, his sister watches the scene from above with a glaring look. Argus receives the report and gets an immediate headache. The situation is way worse than he thought it would be, as an invader seemed to randomly spawn inside the capital and start throwing hands. The question of how it got in is less important to him, but rather who helped navigate the beast inside is the real problem. His best guess is that it's someone from Harness Academy, a place teeming with suspicious people plotting their demise. Regardless, he's in dire need of comrades to control the situation of the capital, and at this time Shindo and his group resume their journey to the capital. 3 days flew by into the extermination mission. Poful began to wonder if there's truly a job for inferior beings like them to take up in the capital. Being the kind man he is, Shindo assures them that their ability to read and write is already a huge edge, so he urges the kid to have more confidence. Hakama, on the other hand, points in the distance, yapping that the capital is super close. Our boy is absolutely gobsmacked when he stares at the grand beauty of the royal capital. By the evening, they arrive inside the capital. The place is hustling with people all around. Hakama yaps that the capital relies on imports, which means every kind of good is available here, even the Kodama clothing that they once yapped about. Shindo finds it interesting and all, and takes notice of a bunch of insect mutants too. There's an abundance of races around here, showcasing how they all develop differently. The streets are tidy. Safety is top-notch in the capital too. But even with all those benefits, there are some disgusting parts. Shindo reflects that each era shares its own bundle of problems. He asks Hakama about the entrance exam of the academy, and learns that it's gonna go down next week. They're just gonna hang tight until the exam starts. But overhearing their yapping session, the blonde girl starts wondering if this party is trying to get into Harness Academy, especially since NGL, they all look like inferior species to her. We arrive at the hotel rooms, where Hakama and Nino pounce on top of the comfy beds, finally living their best life now that they can sleep somewhere proper. Shindo's initial goal of reaching the capital officially checked off the list. This gets him thinking about what's next, because even though it's a new era, Bro still has to figure out how to make money to survive. By the way, Bro got a lump of money for wiping out the bandits, but he knows that cash ain't lasting forever, especially not with 4 mouths to feed. Then there's the extra headache of finding these kids jobs. The obvious move here, a meeting with Argus. Problem is, they've got zero clue where the guy even is, or what connections could lead them to him. Shindo runs through a bunch of options in his head, prioritizing the corruptors' investigation first. He knows there are people in this era trying to exploit those monsters for their own goals, and corruptors are dangerous by nature, so there's no way he's letting that slide. Not this time. He refuses to let the living face total annihilation again, so he casually asks Hakama what people in this country do when they need to research something. Turns out they read books or consult someone knowledgeable, and books themselves are stupid expensive. Even back in the village they had to pool resources just to afford them. Meanwhile, the royal capital's got a legendary library that makes research way easier, and Shindo immediately clocks that he can use it to dig up clues about the lab Kagura left behind. Bro's at the receptionist's desk, getting flat-out rejected by the girl there. Since books are sacred national property, only students of a recognized academy or nobles get free entry. Another wall in Shindo's way. Hakama hilariously points out that Shindo can't even read in his current state. Bro's still grinding through the alphabet like he's cramming for an exam, while two cloaked dudes secretly spy on them as part of their mission. They roll up to confront Shindo for some petty yapping, except the conversation opens with a straight-up punch. Our boy reflexively snatches the fist out of the air and clowns the guy for having such lovely manners in his introduction. So much for the city being safe when people are just swinging on strangers, but the guy stays arrogant, and Shindo bats his fist away, sending a chunk of divine-powered magic flying off course. The fighter hypes him up for having sharp instincts, while Poful can't wrap her head around these guys casually slinging divine power in the middle of a civilian zone. Our boy wants answers on what these losers' deal is, and quickly clocks that someone's put a hit on his head. Honestly works out in his favor, even though these bullies threaten Shindo's group to bounce from the capital or deal with danger. Shindo doesn't flinch, inviting the guy to try again, only to get his fist caught and slammed straight into the dirt. After handing out a reality check to one of them, he turns to the other, who's firing off a magic blast right at him. Shindo doesn't even bother dodging, blocks the fiery attack head-on, and lets the guy think he actually landed something. But out of the smoke a hand shoots out and yoinks the guy up like he weighs nothing. Switching to his serious voice, Shindo clowns them for being pathetically weak, daring them to try again, if they've even got the guts for it. Bro is out here just aura farming. Meanwhile, his victim's stuck wondering how a low-level species is packing this much strength. Suddenly a knight's order breaks up the fight. It's Karina, visibly annoyed that her day off got interrupted for this. She doesn't even care about the assailants who jumped Shindo. She just wants to throw both him and Hakama in jail for the 100th time. Lucky for Shindo though, the scene draws the attention of someone connected to Argus, even while Karina's still yelling in his face. After breaking up the street fight, Karina spots Shindo and lights up, thinking she's finally caught the inferior species causing trouble again. She's about to launch into a lecture, when a demi-human bystander steps up and claims she saw the whole thing go down. The bystander backs Shindo up, saying he was jumped first and only fought back to defend himself. When Karina checks the attackers' faces, she realizes, oh no, these are her usual dumbass juniors from Harnisk Academy, and she quietly prays the holy captain's little sister isn't mixed up in this mess again. Shindo asks if she's on patrol, pointing out he figured guild members usually handled stuff like this in the city. Karina says she was just doing her nightly duty of keeping order on her way to a nearby cafe. Now that she's watched Shindo wreck several strong academy students without breaking a sweat, she starts feeling like her captain's earlier suspicions about this inferior human might be dead on. She tries to bounce and tells Shindo to stay out of trouble, but he doesn't let her off that easy. He uses the moment to ask her to escort him to meet her Captain Argus. Once our boy finally lands an audience with Captain Argus of the 7th Division, he cuts straight to the chase and asks the man to hire them, reminding him he was the one who offered help in the first place. When Argus asks about the kids tagging along, Shindo fills him in. He ran into the bandits Argus had been hunting, captured them, and handed them over to the guild. Argus can't quite believe someone who looks like an inferior species pulled that off so fast. Shindo keeps going, saying he brought Nino and his big sister Pofel along because they had no one else, and would get treated like garbage for being inferior. So he asks the captain to set them up with work. Argus reminds Bro he's got no obligation toward them, but Shindo shoots back that he's willing to take responsibility since he's the one who saved them. Argus finds that surprisingly compelling, while the kids look at their savior with hopeful eyes. Cue the captain's brain working overtime. He decides to use the kids as leverage, telling Shindo he'll let them stay and work at his place, but only if Shindo agrees to teach at the academy. Shindo accepts on the spot, no hesitation, and next thing you know the kids are in maid outfits. Pofel thanks him sincerely, while the captain tells his maid staff to properly look after them with zero discrimination. As Shindo walks off with Argus, he asks what's the catch with this instructor gig. Argus says that even though he's got no clue where Shindo's actually from, his gut tells him the guy's trustworthy. Then he gets to the real point. He wants Shindo to infiltrate Harnisk Academy. Shindo goes serious, asking for the full rundown, and Argus starts breaking down the whole political mess going on in the capital. Several factions are stuck in a quiet cold war over the throne since the king's critically ill and could kick the bucket any second. On top of the usual succession drama, there are also people with zero legitimate claim to the throne who still want power, and these dudes apparently are extremely dangerous, using corruptors, people here call them invaders, as weapons to push their agenda. Shindo thinks back to that lord from earlier and starts realizing there might be even bigger threats lurking than that guy. The captain says he wants to expose these people and find their hidden base, and the spot he suspects most is Harnisk Academy. Argus knocks on a door and introduces Shindo to his little sister Milia Walton, explaining she attends the academy and can guide him there. Milia immediately shows off her sharp tongue, calling Shindo a lowly inferior species, just like Karina did earlier. The captain tries to shut her down, reminding her that's rude, but she keeps insisting she doesn't approve of handing something this important to someone she sees as inferior. Shindo calls out her attitude, which embarrasses the captain into apologizing for her behavior. Karina steps closer and whispers that Milia is actually super capable. She just really doesn't vibe with inferior species. Milia keeps throwing insults, saying she doesn't see him as qualified for the instructor role. Hakama then makes it worse by casually blurting out that her guardian can't even read, before quickly following up by hyping up how strong Shindo actually is. Her words make Karina realize something. Milia was the one who told those academy students to jump Argus earlier. The captain apologizes again, promising to properly discipline his sister. Shindo changes the subject and asks Argus what he's actually supposed to teach. Argus says that from what he's seen, Shindo looks skilled with spirit arts, so he'd be perfect to teach the basics. He lists the 4 basic spirit arts as ignition, discharge, freezing, healing, and backshots, adding that being able to use even 2 of them is already considered solid. Hearing the basics only cover 4 spirit arts, Shindo realizes the bandit leader from earlier was actually kind of a big deal. That move would already count as a special spirit art around here. Shindo quietly smirks, deciding he might just change how this whole era understands special powers. Fast forward a week later, it's finally time for Hakama's entrance exam at the academy. Argus walks in with Shindo since he wants him on instructor duty this year. Turns out one division from the Night Order has to fill the role every year, and it's the 7th Division's turn this time. While Shindo quietly trails behind them, the fat man won't stop staring at our boy. Honestly, feels like he's got beef with Gojo too. Anyway, they eventually reach the headmaster's office, and Argus greets her respectfully. The headmaster smiles seeing her former pupil doing well in the Night Order, then brings up the ongoing faction struggles in the country, and suddenly turns on Shindo, telling the captain he shouldn't treat the academy so lightly by sending an inferior species for such an important role. The captain firmly insists Shindo's more capable than anyone else in his division. When the skinny rat notices the headmaster's warming up to the idea, he jumps in to object, taking over the job of insulting our boy and arguing they can't let an inferior human take the position. Bro, why is literally everybody racist here? The headmaster turns to the Discord mod and asks for his take. The fat man casually agrees with the concern, then brings up a practical point about the backlash they'd get from students and other instructors. The headmaster joins in too, admitting she shares the same worry. Shindo, realizing he's being talked about like he's not even in the room, steps up and speaks for himself, greeting them properly and staying composed even while getting openly disrespected. He asks them straight up whether they're judging him for looking like an inferior species, or because they think he lacks the power for the job. The principal smiles and says the only thing that matters is whether he's actually got the ability, then asks him to prove it. When Argus suggests the headmaster test him herself, she agrees, and a quick mock battle gets set up at the academy's spirit arts training ground. The skinny rat steps up to face Shindo, laughing that at least Jin won't embarrass himself too badly since barely any students are around today. The headmaster lays out the rules, spirit arts only, since that's literally what their new tutor is supposed to teach. Some students gather to watch, Milia included. She's hyped, since this is the first time she'll see the skinny rat actually fight. Shindo already knows how this ends, letting out a quiet sigh before deciding to let the school see his power for themselves. Argus meanwhile starts sweating a little. First time he's seeing the guy he vouched for actually throw hands in public, and he's worried Shindo might embarrass him. Lord Gita, on the other hand, looks way too excited, eager to end this fast and put Shindo in his place. He calls first move and immediately launches a huge fireball, fully convinced it'll end the fight in one hit. Shindo dodges it with 0 effort, while the skinny rat stays cocky, sure he'll still win and prove the captain wrong. He follows up with his signature move, lightning spears, while Shindo keeps dodging every single strike, slowly getting under his skin. While the rat thinks all Shindo can do is run, our boy quietly thinks to himself that this kind of power was never meant to be used on people like this. But with no other option left, Shindo finally decides to show what he's got, and whips out a unique spirit art, gravity manipulation, pinning Lord Gita straight into the ground, making it crystal clear he never stood a chance, and his arrogance meant nothing. So yeah, turns out he really is Gojo after all. He just pulled Blue off right in front of everybody. The headmaster and the fat man, Lord Ludman, are both left standing there shook. Even Argus and his sister Milia stand there with their jaws on the floor, after witnessing such a clean display of power, something they've never seen before. When they ask what exactly just happened, Shindo calmly explains that he simply manipulated the gravity around Lord Gita. Hearing people say they've never seen anything like it, Shindo quietly smiles, realizing just how much the students and even the instructors of this academy still have to learn. Lord Gita grinds his teeth in frustration, lying flat on the ground looking absolutely miserable. Out of sheer pity for the wrinkly old man, our hero finally lets up on the gravity pinning him down. Gita has a full meltdown, shouting that a spirit technique like that shouldn't even exist, insisting the inferior must be using some kind of illegal trick. Our boy quietly stands there and takes the verbal abuse like a champ, while the geezer screeches in his face like an actual Karen. Watching the exchange, the headmaster calmly makes her decision, and the surrounding students are just as impressed. Milia in particular can't wrap her head around how he controls that much divine power. Normally inferiors barely have any at all. Her curiosity spikes, and she's now determined to figure out who Shindo really is. Cut to the welcome ceremony. 1 week later, The headmaster announces that Harnisk Academy was founded to train warriors capable of wiping out invading threats. Anyone too weak to keep up has no place within its walls, but those who succeed are basically guaranteed a future stacked with status and influence. Watching from above, a few demi-humans near Milia are surprised by how many newcomers showed up, quite a few not even from noble families. A lion demi-human named Ryas casually greets Milia, mentioning it's unexpected to see her at the ceremony in person. Mid-chat, he suddenly clocks an inferior sitting beside the faculty and nearly chokes. He completely loses it when Milia reveals the inferior is actually their new teacher, then asks Ryas for his honest first impression based purely on looks. When he bluntly calls the guy an average nobody with no wife and no life, she admits that was her first read too. Feeling a dozen stares drilling into him, Shindo quickly realizes he can't start snooping around the academy too openly on day one. First, he needs to rebrand from worthless inferior to something more neutral and unthreatening, because right now he's basically got a target painted on his back. After the ceremony wraps, it's finally time for his first class. Meanwhile, Lord Guido gathers the senior students and announces that regular classes are officially back, bluntly warning them not to fall behind the promising new talent that just joined. That said, he angrily demands to know why most of the class is missing. The old man smiles on the inside, fully aware most of them would rather die than sit through a lesson taught by an inferior. The greasy rat even went out of his way to spread the word that today's lecture is Shindo's. Surprisingly, our professor doesn't seem bothered at all. He confidently stands at the podium and introduces himself as the new spirit techniques instructor. Without missing a beat, Ryas shamelessly asks whether he's actually got what it takes to teach the academy's most elite class. Our boy responds with a calm smile, saying they'll find out soon enough, telling the lion demi-human he's free to leave if the class ends up beneath him. With that settled, he lays down one rule immediately: never use divine power against humans, under any circumstance. To back that up, he explains that divine power was designed to suppress the regeneration abilities of inhibitors, but humans recover normally after getting hurt, which means its true purpose was always to eliminate invaders. Hearing that, some loudmouth in the back starts trash-talking, calling him soft for supposedly lacking divine power, insisting he's got every right to use his strength however he wants. Mildly annoyed, Professor Shindo invites him to test whether he's actually as weak as claimed, telling the kid right there in the middle of class to hit him with his strongest move. The kid grins arrogantly, declaring he'll never show up to class again if the professor so much as scratches him. Seizing the moment, he conjures a lightning spear crackling with energy. Even Lord Gita tenses up, worried the classroom might not survive a hit that reckless. Without hesitation, the student launches the spear straight at Shindo, kicking up a massive dust cloud across the room. Everyone assumes the inferior just got obliterated, but then a blade shoots out of the haze and jams into the wall behind him, barely missing his ugly mug. Shindo calmly notes that the sword could have gone straight through him if he'd actually meant to kill. With that, he delivers lesson 1 of the semester: never judge someone purely by appearance. Ryas watches in silence, wondering if that technique even counts as a spirit art. Professor Shindo keeps going smoothly, explaining that inferiors get that label because they're considered weak. So he asks, what does that make someone who's clearly leagues above everyone else? His aura surges to its peak as he answers his own question. That's what you call a teacher. Next, lesson 2, he asks the same kid if he even knows the criteria for activating spirit arts. Acting like it's common knowledge, the student answers that it all comes down to vivid imagination. Picture something clearly enough, and the spirits carry it out. Professor Shindo agrees imagination matters, but adds there's one critical piece they're all missing. Spirits respond to different wavelengths, and that's what actually triggers them. There are 8 primary wavelengths total. Ignition, discharge, healing, and freezing are the 4 most people know, but gravity control, light control, atmosphere control, and spatial manipulation exist too, even backshots, if you ask me. Lord Gita nearly chokes watching him casually use all 8. With that reveal, our boy officially kicks off his first real lecture. Later that evening, he mulls over where to start digging into the academy's secrets. The campus is packed with students at every corner, and after that class stunt, he's the main topic of gossip. If he wants answers, he needs access somewhere students aren't allowed. On his way, he crosses paths with Milia, who bluntly demands he admit who he really is. He responds by asking how he could be anything other than the inferior everyone already labels him as. She concedes that track, if not for the fact that he commands all 8 spirit arts effortlessly. Not even most demi-humans can pull that off. Our boy shrugs, telling her it's not that complicated, comparing it to switching tabs between wavelengths, though of course he privately knows it's way more complex than that in practice. She asks to continue the conversation somewhere private. Once alone, she repeats her question. This time he claims he's simply a human who got put in cold sleep beneath Kadama village for a few million years. Humoring him, she asks what he supposedly did before hibernation. Shindo answers honestly that he served as a special forces agent for his country. Even with millennia gone by, he remembers those days like they happened a few years ago. Curious, she pushes further, asking why someone who fought for his nation would end up sealed in cold sleep. He feels the weight of it, admitting he failed his mission. He genuinely believed if he pushed hard enough he could save everyone, but in the end he failed and lost everything. He also confesses that becoming a professor wasn't random. He needs the Walton family's influence. Moving on, he asks where they're headed. She leads him to a dusty, rundown room, explaining it used to be storage space for teaching supplies. An owl statue on one of the shelves immediately grabs his attention. He asks what her real reason for bringing him here was, and Milia admits she's been investigating the strange empty space right next to this storage room. It's too large to just be unused, so she's certain it's hiding something important. Without wasting a second, Professor Shindo casually grabs the owl statue. She side-eyes him, confused why he's petting a dusty old decoration. The moment he twists it slightly, the bookshelves slide apart, revealing a hidden passage. He calmly congratulates her for being right about the secret room. Milia is left speechless, unable to process how fast he solved it. Our professor coolly explains he noticed the owl was the only clean object in a room buried under thick dust. After that, he tells her to stay behind while he investigates the chamber alone. Surprised, Milia firmly states she's coming with him. He reminds her there could be a dangerous invader inside and he might not be able to protect her. The blonde makes it clear her skills aren't to be underestimated, confidently claiming she's leagues above everyone in her class, with only her brother possibly outmatching her. Hearing that, he decides to take her word for it. The two of them carefully descend a decrepit staircase that stretches way deeper than either expected. Milia quietly appreciates how convenient it is to command light effortlessly in total darkness. Shindo casually jokes that the place feels like the perfect dungeon for monsters to spawn in a fantasy game, leaving the girl confused by his gamer reference. Curious again, she brings up his backstory once more, asking if he already has a suspect in mind, since hunting threats was supposedly his specialty. He can't help but feel amused at how fast she bought his unbelievable story. As a small reward for her trust, he reveals he strongly suspects Lord Redman is involved somehow. She immediately asks why he's so certain. Professor Shindo explains that while the man's charismatic during lectures, there's something deeply unsettling about him when he's alone. In those quiet moments, the greasy bastard gives off the vibe of someone definitely plotting something shady. He explains this kind of behavior is common among people who are completely different from the persona they show the world. On top of that, he found it pretty obvious the man is way too observant for a teacher. Milia admits she originally suspected Lord Gita instead, but Shindo dismisses the theory, pointing out someone with zero emotional control could never orchestrate anything truly sinister, going as far as to say the wrinkly old nutcase is probably decent at heart. At last, the two reach the bottom of the staircase, opening into a massive dust-filled hall. Milia's eyes widen in shock at the enormous labyrinth hidden directly beneath the academy grounds. Suddenly, Shindo stops walking, just as stunned. Not even in his wildest imagination did he expect to find Kagura's laboratory here. When he spots the doors protected by nanomachines, which people of this era simply call spirits, he becomes certain this really is Kagura's lab. Milia grows nervous, because even after searching for so long, she'd never managed to find this massive door hidden beneath the academy the whole time. Shindo explains to her that ordinary people would need a special access key to open a door like this. He remembers how Hakama inherited the key back in Kadama village, and figures someone here must have inherited a similar key. However, Shindo already knows he himself holds full access automatically, so he calmly raises his hand. The lock system instantly recognizes him as having the highest level of authority, and unlocks the door for him. As the gate slowly opens, Shindo wonders if whoever's trying to overthrow this country's rulers might also have had access to this place. Meanwhile, Milia still stands there stunned, unable to process that something like this existed right beneath their academy the whole time. She asks if he really didn't need a key, and Shindo casually remarks that ancient humans are just built different in that regard. Milia starts believing his words might actually be true, and quietly follows him deeper underground. Inside, they find several corruptors locked in large metal cages, and strangely, all of them stay completely calm with zero sign of going wild. Shindo recalls the corruptors the bandits had locked up earlier, and how they also stayed unusually quiet, right up until the moment they got released. What troubles him most though is the question of how anyone could have transported corruptors this massive into a place like this without anyone noticing. Milia admits her brother's suspicion about this academy might have been right after all, suggesting they quietly hide and wait to ambush whoever's responsible, since the culprits will surely come back eventually. Shindo, however, tells her that instead of waiting around, they should seal the academy and deal with the corruptors first. Milia argues they can't let the mastermind escape, but Shindo explains protecting the students has to come first. If these corruptors start rampaging, every life in the academy is at risk. When he points out her brother would probably make the same call, she finally agrees. Shindo adds he's got a bad feeling about all of this, and his gut's usually right. He says he'll investigate the lab a bit further himself, and asks her to head back up and grab her brother, so the academy can go on curfew, and the students stay protected. After sending her back to the surface, Shindo pushes deeper into the underground facility, hoping to dig up something useful. Meanwhile, up top, the skinny rat is getting mocked for losing to the new tutor. Even so, he still calls Shindo an inferior species and blames him for wrecking his reputation. The headmaster walks over and tells him to knock it off with the weird outbursts, since the students are getting uncomfortable, publicly humiliating him before asking about Lord Redman, who's been missing since that morning. The headmaster feels overwhelmed, and the fat man's absence only makes her more anxious. Just then, she notices a dark cloud forming above the academy, and wonders what's going on. Meanwhile, Milia rushes toward the surface, but the moment she steps out the door, she comes face to face with Lord Redman, the fat man who'd been missing all morning, now wearing a purely evil expression that screams he's up to no good. Back in the lab, Shindo examines some strange reddish portals pulsing like they're alive, wondering whether the thing is actually alive, and if Kagura made it. He then finds the message cube Kagura left behind, along with the nanomachine injector, hoping the cube holds clues to help him figure out the situation. He activates it and a hologram of Kagura pops up, casually holding a coffee. Kagura had already expected Shindo to reach this facility before anyone else, since this lab is closest to where he'd wake up. The doc explains that in this lab he was developing a device humanity had never pulled off, even hundreds of millions of years ago, and that a small chunk of its power has been sealed into the injector for Shindo to use. He hypes himself up for the achievement, before revealing the mind-blowing device is actually a teleportation device. Never in his wildest imagination did Shindo think Kagura could build something on this scale, but now the pieces start clicking into place. Argus mentioned invaders appearing across the city out of nowhere. Alarm bells start ringing in his head, because whoever owns this device is likely behind everything, especially with an entire zoo's worth of monsters caged down here. Then he notices something off about the mad scientist's recorded message. The original teleportation device was pure blue. If that's true, what the hell is this red one standing in front of him now? Just as the nearby clock strikes 12, the device activates with a violent hum. Shindo braces himself, ready for whatever nightmare is about to crawl out of it. Instead, every invader in the cages instantly vanishes into thin air. Up on the surface, Argus and the Holy Knights witness their worst nightmare unfolding live. Hundreds of invaders rain down from the sky onto the royal capital, looking like they just dropped into a battle royale match. Back underground, the greasy fat man turns toward Milia with the creepiest smile imaginable, mockingly asking why she seems so tense and impatient. Milia coldly tells the Discord mod responsible for all this to step aside unless he's looking for a fight. Genuinely surprised, Lord Redman admits he suspected she'd been investigating him for a while. Unfortunately for her, she figured it out too late. When Milia demands to know what that means, he calmly declares that the day of judgment has arrived. The balding potato sighs, revealing he'd originally planned to delay this whole event, but the two rats snooping around his lab forced his hand. More specifically, he realized the real threat to his grand plan is Shindo. Every instinct in his gut warned him the new instructor would become the biggest headache imaginable, just like Milia's brother. Without needing confirmation, he already knows Shindo was the one who found the hidden passage. Deciding he's wasted enough time yapping, he concludes it's best to eliminate all witnesses right here. Milia nearly laughs at the idea he thinks he can beat her. A disturbingly demonic grin spreads across Redman's face as he boasts about the unimaginable power he's gathered. What he doesn't realize is a girl is quietly creeping up behind him with a pot bigger than his own head. Milia nervously sweats, torn between fear for the girl and doubt over whether this ridiculous plan will actually work. Without hesitation, Hakama swings with everything her tiny arms have got and smashes it into the fat lard-filled skull. Milia stares at her in shock, wanting to know how she even found this place. Hakama hurriedly explains she came looking for Shindo. There's absolute chaos outside, and there's no saving everyone without their guardian. On the way, she ran into another new student, Kudo, who mentioned their professor entered the storage room not long ago. The new girl feels slightly guilty about knocking out a teacher, but Hakama insists the creep had it coming. Besides, since he never saw their faces from behind, they could easily pin the blame on the blonde princess if things go sideways. At that moment, Shindo finally reaches the top of the stairs. Concerned, he asks what happened, only to spot a floppy pig on the floor like a fallen bowling pin. Hakama quickly snaps him out of it, filling him in that the city outside has descended into complete chaos. He's not surprised at all, since he already knows there's only one place the lab's invaders could have been sent. Milia turns pale as it hits her, and the three of them rush outside without wasting another second. Fires rage across the city, nearly half of it in ruins. Terrified citizens scatter in every direction as hell breaks loose. Among all the invading creatures, one monster that looks like a hulking Vilgax stands out as by far the strongest. Seeing her beloved home reduced to this, Milia is left completely speechless. Meanwhile, Shindo feels the weight of failure crush his chest again, thinking he should have destroyed the device when he had the chance. Hakama snaps him back to reality, pointing at the massive tentacle monster charging up a devastating attack aimed straight at the royal palace. Determined to atone for his mistake, Shindo uses the injection Kagura left him. After using it, he gains a toned-down version of teleportation. The mad scientist had explained the nanomachines only store enough energy to activate it once every 24 hours, and its range is supposedly limited to a short distance within the user's line of sight. However, those restrictions apply to ordinary users, and Shindo is anything but ordinary. Someone of his caliber can basically teleport as far as his eyes can see. Without hesitating even a second, he vanishes and reappears directly in the path of the massive laser beam, just before it can strike the royal palace. Right away, our boy threw up a spatial shield, blocking the attack and saving the whole castle in the process. When the monsters fell upon the city, chaos ensued for real. The guild worker who had met Argus in the forest ran to the base like his life depended on it. He told the guild master that there was a giant erosive monster at the outer walls. The man looking out the window, unhappy about it, admitted he already knew, but there was nothing more they could do about it. The man with white hair and gray wolf ears was the guild master of the royal capital, Harden Gunslot. He explained that he had already sent everyone who could move to help with the rescues. Meanwhile, the Sacred Knights were doing the same with their available members. The young guard asked him what exactly he meant by nothing more we can do. Gunslot revealed that half of the Sacred Knights were currently outside the royal capital on a mission. This was a huge shock to the young girl. From the window they saw the great erosive preparing its attack. This must have been planned, a crime timed for the moment the Sacred Knights weren't around. Gunslot, disappointed, knew that if the captain of the guard had been present, he would have been able to stop that huge monster. With nothing to do, he watched as the huge energy cannon was fired at the building. Gunslot closed his eyes, waiting for his end. However, his assistant pointed to the window. He told the guildmaster to look. Gunslot opened his eyes hurriedly. A man had appeared in front of the window, blocking the attack directed at them. The young girl, excited, recognized that person on the spot, the man from Kadama village. Only a bit of smoke rose to the sky as the monster's attack ceased. After his failure, our boy retreated, landing atop one of the castle's inner walls. He gathered energy in his hand and launched a retaliatory energy cannon blast at the monster. The strike hit the erosive squarely, making it scream in pain. Shindo frowned at the result of his attack. The monster's shoulder had been severely damaged, but it was healing at an almost unreal speed. The monster was way too large for Shindo to eliminate in one go. On top of that, he felt the teleportation had eaten up more energy than expected, so things weren't going to end as smoothly as usual. Since that was the case, he decided to switch tactics. A sword materialized in our boy's hand. He swung the weapon, sending a cutting energy blast toward the monster. The attack hit the enemy, inflicting another deep wound. Shindo seized the opening to close the distance, but he still had the entire city between them. He hoped the attack would buy him some time, wanting the monster fully regenerated only once he actually reached it. Shindo tried to stay focused, applying the basics of nano-machine theory. A gravitational field surrounded him, lifting the weight off his body, while he generated wind to propel himself with each jump, basically manipulating atmospheric pressure to accelerate his movement. As he advanced, he saw a fish monster pinning a guild member to the ground, trying to devour him. A fireball dropped on the monster, saving the guild member just in time, and it wasn't Shindo who did it, but oddly enough, the two students Milia had sent to attack him earlier. The guild member got up, thanking them for the help before finishing off the erosive himself. The duo didn't care about the city being in chaos. They knew what they had to do. United, the three began fighting together against the monsters surrounding them, careful not to take unnecessary risks. Shindo blew past the monsters, dropping each one with a single strike. The guild member was left in awe at the man's speed, while the two young ones recognized the inferior species man from earlier. After clearing the street, our boy could finally see the large monster ahead. Its regeneration still needed time to finish before he could safely close the remaining distance. The monster kept letting out furious roars. From its shoulders, which had energy pockets that looked like little volcanoes, two blasts fired toward Shindo. Alert, he dodged each one the moment he noticed them coming. Not that they were even a real threat. Our boy kept advancing, knocking down more erosive monsters along the way, intending to close in and end the fight before the big one could launch its real cannon attack. Shindo moved faster and faster, getting back into the groove of using the nano-machines in the atmosphere. Finally, he reached the square where the monster stood. He leapt toward it, circling for a better angle. The monster turned to face him, its back now to the castle, no longer a direct threat to it. Argus and his companions, along with Milia, Hakama and Kudo, watched as Shindo took on the monster from below. Our boy tore across the rooftops, landing cuts at angles no one had ever seen before, hitting every part of the massive erosive in ways it simply couldn't block or dodge. Being that huge worked against it. It made for an easy target. Shindo kept attacking as he climbed up the monster's body, eventually leaping into the sky to face it head-on from above. He prepared the finishing blow. The sword in his hand shifted into a spear crackling with electricity, and he hurled it down at the monster to end it for good. The spear dropped from above and struck the creature's body, which detonated, swallowing everything around it in one massive blast and putting an end to the threat for good. The explosion was so big it was visible even from the royal palace, where the guildmaster stood. Both the young messenger and Gunslot were left speechless, watching the gigantic monster vanish and wondering out loud who that man even was. 3 days later, the city's reconstruction was in full swing. From the hotel, Shindo watched people hauling logs and other materials back and forth, over and over. He stretched after a pretty decent dawn. No major incident had happened since that day 3 days ago. thanks to how skilled the Holy Knights were. Our boy sat down with a sigh, finally able to rest. Shindo wondered to himself whether they were even prepared to face more eroding giants like that one. With the Knights working as a team, things had been resolved fast. The Harnisk Academy had also been shut down for investigation. Ludman, who'd apparently been the mastermind behind it all, got captured. The instructors and the headmistress were also hauled in for questioning at the royal capital. Our boy lay back lazily, aware the academy would be closed for a while. Still, the whole incident left him with something to actually worry about. He could handle enemies bunched together, but once they spread out across a wide area, there was no way to fight them all at once. To keep everyone safe, Shindo knew he had to get stronger, and that meant tracking down more labs. He picked up the yapping cube to check on it again when someone knocked on his door. He opened it to find a young blonde girl in a big party dress bowing to greet him. She said she'd come to guide him, Professor. Milia's whole vibe had changed completely, her old arrogant look gone, swapped for an outfit going for cute and elegant instead of powerful. Our boy felt confused by what she was yapping about. Since the academy was closed, Milia eventually let it slip that her brother was calling for him. She explained that her brother wanted to thank him for what happened, and that someone else was there wanting to talk to him too. Shindo couldn't believe she'd come all this way just for that. Milia thought it was obvious, of course she'd personally show up for someone like him. Professor, sending just a servant would be rude when the Walton family's reputation was on the line. Milia had traveled here herself for this. Provocatively, our boy asked if she'd stopped calling people inferior species. Milia nodded, claiming she'd learned her lesson, brilliantly declaring that she'd no longer judge people by their looks. Everyone deserved respect. That said, she begged Shindo to let her stay by his side so she could learn from him. As Milia kept yapping, Hakama opened the door. Rolling his eyes, Shindo thought about how differently she was acting now. When Hakama saw the two of them, she admitted she'd been bored back at the dorms. That's why she came to visit. Milia's gaze shifted to the bed. Why was this countryside girl even allowed in here? So embarrassing. Our boy immediately called her out. Didn't she just say she'd learned her lesson? Milia was escorted to Argus's mansion, where maids and butlers bowed to receive her orders. The head butler called over Pofel and Nino to show Shindo around the place. Our boy noticed the two had already gotten used to working there. Walking down a long corridor, Shindo asked if the brothers had run into any trouble during the big commotion. Pofel said everyone had worked together to protect them. Every maid and butler on staff was seriously strong. Shindo silently thanked them for taking good care of the brothers. Pofel mentioned hearing that Shindo had been amazing, and when asked who'd told them that, it turned out to be Milia and Argus. Milia, pleased to get the credit, promised to keep spreading word of his success, said it was her duty as his disciple. Milia laughed, telling Pofel and Nino that if they were the same race as the professor, they should follow his example. The duo cheerfully agreed. The boy leaned in to whisper that Milia used to be really tough on them, but she'd gotten a lot nicer lately. Shindo ended up comparing her personality shift to Charles's. Both had completely changed after seeing what the youngsters were actually capable of. Shindo arrived at a golden door. Pofel knocked, announcing the guests had arrived. Stepping inside, our boy found himself face to face with Argus and a man he didn't recognize. Wolf ears, a serious gaze, and a scar staring him down. Shindo stayed quiet. Argus and his brother greeted him, and before stepping out, the knight asked Shindo to sit with them. Shindo sat on the sofa across from Argus and the stranger, with Mile and Hakama standing behind him. Argus apologized for the sudden invite. Our boy waved it off, saying he'd been bored anyway. Argus introduced the man beside him as Harding Gonzalez, master of the Royal Capital Guild. Harding stood to greet our boy, saying it was an honor to finally meet him. Once seated again, Harding admitted he'd seen him in action the other day, and honestly, if Shindo hadn't stopped that giant monster, the whole country would have been in serious trouble. He bowed his head, thanking Shindo deeply for saving him. Our boy didn't take all the credit for himself, saying he'd just knocked down the big guy. The Holy Knights handled the rest, and they were the ones who deserved the thanks. Argus smiled at the reminder. Harding noted how humble the man in front of him was, not greedy like some others he'd met. Our boy asked if they'd really just called him here to say thanks. Harding said no. Because of the incident, the royal family wanted to meet him. Our boy, surprised, leaned in to hear the guildmaster out. Harding wanted to know exactly who Shindo really was, before letting him anywhere near royalty. With guild members stationed in every city, there wasn't much news that slipped past him. Argus admitted he'd taken the liberty of looking into Shindo himself, but hadn't turned up anything. He said he wanted things cleared up too, and asked Shindo to stop hiding things. He wanted to know where he'd really come from, and what he was doing in this country.